So up next, our last before we will go into a special Warp and Woof intermission. But before that, we have a lifelong Richmond resident and lifelong animal lover. She works at Purina Animal Nutrition here in town, but her love of animals is more personal. For the last 25 years, she's been doing small volunteer reptile education shows for schools, for scout groups, for clubs, for churches, for fundraisers. So please welcome Jennifer Brokamp.
So imagine you're hanging up your kindergartner's coat. And it seems heavier than usual. Why is this coat heavy? So of course you check the pockets to find out what's in the pockets making this coat heavy. And you reach into the pocket and you come out with a handful of mud and dead leaves. Well, you're going to ask your kid, why are your coat pockets full of mud and dead leaves? Well, that's where the worms live. That's how I started. My parents love to tell that story. My call of the wild continued at my grandparents' house on the edge of Richmond, where I could catch grasshoppers that spit in my hand when I picked them up, and the crawdads that crawl up through their tunnels in the yard, and watch the toads that sit around under the porch lights catching moths after the sun goes down. And then I saw my first snake. It's just a little garter snake. Just like this little guy here. Now, I knew what a snake was, of course, but nobody had ever told me that I was supposed to be scared of them or that they were bad. And of course, I was fascinated. Here's this little thing crawling across the top of the bush, and it's got no legs. This is awesome. This is the coolest critter I've ever seen. So of course, it wasn't very long before I started bringing these home as well. At one point, we had 3 of them. 2 of them were about the size of this little guy here, and one of them was a really big female. Well, one day, we didn't have 3 anymore, we only had 2. And I was pretty disappointed because I was pretty sure that the big one ate one of the small ones. I mean, that's what happens, right? We didn't think much about it until the day my dad came home from work and saw a stick on the living room floor. And he reached down to pick it up and it moved. The mystery of the missing snake had been solved. But I was always bringing home things like this, and everybody knew. My family knew, my friends knew, even our neighbors knew. At one point I brought home 2 little baby snapping turtles, and I just loved those little turtles. I'd play with them in the backyard, and I'd get the hose and make a lot of mud and build like a little mud bog, but for turtles instead of trucks. And my sister and I were out playing with them one day, and one of them got lost. I don't know how we lost one of them, but we were little kids, and you know, our attention spans weren't the greatest. But we looked all over the yard and could not find that little baby turtle for anything. I was heartbroken. This was my pet. I loved these animals. Now, I still love the one I had left, but I felt so bad for the one that was missing. Then one day, about 2 weeks later, there was a knock at the door, and one of the neighbor kids came up and said, "Is this yours?" And there's my baby snapping turtle. Of course it's mine. Who else's would it be? But like I said, everybody knew, and I was always bringing these things home. My grandpa sacrificed every coffee can in his shop for me to poke holes in the lid and bring critters home in. And then, I don't know if you remember this, McDonald's started selling Happy Meals in buckets with preformed holes in the lid. Yes. Oh my gosh, those were the greatest. You could bring home anything in those. It was fantastic. But along with just bringing them home, I wanted to know everything I could about these little animals. So I started taking summer classes, summer nature classes. I checked out every library book I could get my hands on. I wanted to know everything. And I thought I did. I knew quite a bit. Kind of like, little boys that memorize all the names of the dinosaurs and can identify every last one of them. Well, that was me and reptiles. One day my uncle drops by. He'd been fishing. He's carrying this 5-gallon bucket in his hand. And this little 5-gallon bucket is this itty bitty teeny tiny snake, maybe not even a fourth of the size of this one. It was just a little yellowish colored snake with some brown banded markings down its back. I knew right away what it was. This was a baby common northern water snake. They're found all over the place here. Knew exactly what it was. My parents weren't convinced. Remember, this is almost 40 years ago. There's no internet. There's no smartphones. There's no Alexa to say, hey Alexa, what kind of snakes live around here? We did have the Encyclopedia Britannica, all 24 volumes. Okay? But it was kind of vague and there were no pictures. So here we've got this little bitty snake that's absolutely terrifying. And it's flattened its head and it's flattened its body and it's striking repeatedly. Well, I'm going to try to make it feel a little bit better, so we transfer it from the bucket into a 10-gallon aquarium that I have hastily turned into a habitat. Of course, the poor little thing's still striking, and it's hitting the glass and it's leaving some saliva residue on the glass. Well, this is pretty much freaking my parents out. I'm a little kid. Just because it's what I say it is doesn't necessarily mean that's what it is. They don't know the snake is harmless. They don't know there are no venomous snakes native to Wayne County. They know there's no way I'm going to keep my hand out of that tank. They know I'm going to play with the snake and be bitten. They weren't wrong. So doing what protective parents do, they decided that they needed to dispose of the dangerous little snake for my safety. And there was no argument that I could make that could change their minds. Defeated, I went back into the house. I got into a sleeping bag and I was sitting on the living room floor with a sleeping bag pulled up over my head and I was crying because I knew what was going to happen to this poor little snake. And I just sat there listening for the sound that I knew was coming. And I heard it. It was the sound of the metal shovel hitting the concrete of the backyard sidewalk. And I knew that the little snake was gone. And I just sobbed. It just broke my heart. Looking back, I realized that that was the defining moment that changed me from a little kid who was just obsessed with critters to somebody who wanted to do something to help them, to maybe keep this from happening again. Because I really felt like it was my fault that that little snake had died. If I hadn't loved them so much, my uncle wouldn't have brought it over, and it wouldn't have scared my parents. As I grew, I continued taking classes, and I was fortunate enough to find someone who was willing to mentor me in my strange obsession with these animals. And not only did he teach me everything I ever wanted to know about reptiles and more, but he also taught me how to share that information with others. He started letting me tag along when he did educational programs with reptiles. And it wasn't too long before I branched out and started doing those on my own. I felt if I could just reach one kid and share these with them before somebody told that child that they were supposed to be afraid. If I could just reach one person that could see a snake and say, hey, that's a pretty fascinating creature, and enjoy watching it and letting it go on its way instead of first thinking, I've got to kill it. If I could save one snake, then maybe I would make up for that one whose life I cost. And that is why we live with a house full of reptiles.
That was spectacular. And I think before we go all the way into intermission, what we're going to do during intermission is Jen is here and is going to share not only the story, but some of the reptiles she lives with and shows. So do you think we can introduce them before intermission, and would it work that way or no?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's all, you can pull them out and we'll meet the reptiles. And then during intermission, if you want to come up and learn more about the reptiles, Jen will be here to tell you more about the reptiles. So, Jen will Phil, okay, Phil's the wrangler. I can tell you that there is water in this tank. Up first. Let's see who we have up first. Special guest for Call of the Wild. Who do we have? Who's this?
This is Bowser. And Bowser is a common snapping turtle. Obviously, they're very common around here. As you can see, Bowser's not trying to bite me. We've had Bowser since he was a teeny tiny little baby snapping turtle. Unfortunately, I didn't lose him. So he's now 7 years old, and he's been an important part of our reptile program since we got him. What's that? I'm sorry, I missed that. Anyway, so yeah, Bowser is up here, and I will turn him around so that he's facing me. But yeah, if anybody wants to pet the back of his shell, that's fine. He's quite used to that. He's been doing that for a very, very long time.
How hard does Bowser bite? What would it take to get Bowser to bite? Do they really snap?
Yes, and he has snapped at me a couple of times. He gets kind of irritated when I rearrange his enclosure. If I'm messing around cleaning things and I'm moving things around, it kind of irritates him. I made the mistake once of reaching over to try to pet him while I was in the middle of that, and he kind of gave me a little half snap to let me know he wasn't cool with it. He'll give me a little bit of a snap when I go to clean his shell. Snapping turtles have this really rough, bumpy shell, and what that does for them in the wild is it collects mud and moss, and they grow algae on it, and it helps them blend in on the bottom of the river or the lake floor. And then they can just sit there quietly and then reach out and snap a fish as they go by. But in captivity, of course, when we bring him out for shows, we don't want him to feel nasty and slimy, so we do brush his shell and give him a bath, and he's not real thrilled about that, but he tolerates it.
Well, he's looking good. He's looking good. Shall we introduce our next guest?
Absolutely.
Whoa. Hi. Right. Hey, buddy. All right. Let's meet this cuddly friend.
This is Larry, and despite the name, Larry actually is a girl. I sadly misgendered Larry for a very, very long time. I started with 3 of these, 2 females and a male. We lost one of them after one had some babies, and I thought the one we lost was the mother, and so I thought I had a male and female left. I sold what I thought was the female because I didn't want to breed anymore. We had 6 babies. We still have 2 of them. So yeah, breeding and getting rid of the reptiles really isn't my thing. So it wasn't a good idea to have any more. Until I decided to take a close look at Larry one day. I was going to show somebody his residual spurs that only the males have, and Larry doesn't have any. So Larry's not the father of the 2 babies, but the mother. And Larry's been a part of our program now for several years. She is a Madagascar Dumeral's boa, obviously from Madagascar. They are a heavy-bodied ground boa. While some of them can get bigger than this, she is full-grown. They range anywhere from size between 5 and 6 feet. Even the biggest ones can get up to about 8, but that's really, really rare. She's about a nice average, medium, middle of the road size. They're a pretty docile snake, and she's just been really good about, I used to have a really big Burmese python that was the grand finale of my shows, but I'm old and I have a bad back and I don't really want to pick up a snake that big. So Larry is the big snake that we have that's impressive enough to really give kids a thrill, but yet small enough that I can handle her by myself, and she's quite comfortable to carry. And with her sweet, docile personality, she is a very nice addition to our program. she did give us a little bit of a scare one day. Dumerel's boas are ophiophagous, which means they will eat other snakes. And, okay, all of the Dumerel's boas in the United States are descendant from a group of about 50 individuals that were brought here many generations ago. So they're just a little bit inbred. And
She doesn't mean that, Larry.
we had Larry in a pillowcase. Larry was maybe about the size of this one over here. This is her son, Romeo. And we had Larry in a zippered pillowcase. And of course, Larry, being a snake, could smell a snake. She was smelling herself. And she felt the texture of the zipper, and so she started eating the zipper from inside the pillowcase, and then managed to get the zipper all the way down, and then started eating herself through the pillowcase. And of course, it just kept tightening around her and tightening around her, and I was right in the middle of one of my programs. I didn't know what we were going to do, but fortunately, we were able to untangle her. Snakes regurgitate very easily, so the zipper came right back up, and obviously no harm was done to Larry. We do not put Larry in zippered pillowcases any longer.
Yeah, Larry seemed to be giving you a big hug there for a second around the neck.
Yeah. She's just recently woken up from her winter slumber, and she's had a nice meal, and now she's just kind of checking things out. They do move around, but mostly they just want to hold on so they don't fall. Romeo over here, her son, was born in September of 2012, and he actually belongs to my son Thomas. Thomas bought him from me with his own money because he didn't want to let him go. He has a little heart-shaped marking on his side, which is how he got his name. And believe it or not, Romeo has been an absolutely fantastic therapy animal. When Thomas came home from school when he was younger and he was frustrated or upset or anxious, he wouldn't talk. He'd just say, "I need to hold Romeo." And he'd go get Romeo out, and holding Romeo would just really calm him down. And they'd play Legos. And then there was the time that they tried to play trucks, but Romeo got stuck in the truck, and I had to take the truck apart to get him out. But that's a little kid for you. And Romeo also won grand champion at the Wayne County 4-H Fair in the pets division. So, yeah, we've got an award winner here. So this is Romeo and Larry.
All right, Romeo and Larry. Romeo was sort of warming up to me, I felt like there for a second, so that was nice. And I think we have, I'll let these Romeo and Larry get back in their cases for a moment. I believe we have some other friends to introduce.
Just one more.
We have one more friend. This is a large Tupperware type container. It doesn't contain.
This is Diesel's RV.
This is Diesel's RV, she says.
Recreational vehicle.
So we'll soon meet Diesel. Bowser's head is back out, but he's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
He's hanging out.
Over to pet him. He'll go right back in.
Oh, there he is.
He's a shy boy. Okay, come on, easy, easy.
Oh, here he comes. All right. Everybody, just so you know, always keep your pets on a leash. There's a leash here.
This is Diesel. Diesel is a black and white Argentine tegu lizard. And if you know what a Komodo dragon is or a monitor, these are basically the New World equivalent of monitor lizards. And they're known as the puppy dogs of the lizard world. Argentine tegus are actually quite popular as pets because they calm down quite nicely, and they will actually learn to interact with their owners. And Diesel's been with us. How long have we had Diesel?
Just after we got married.
Yeah,
6
so
years?
yeah, yep, 6-7 years now. And she's been a great program animal. We can just obviously put her on the harness and leash, and Phil walks her around, and the kids just walk up and pet her. So She's a real sweet girl.
And she's only eaten 2 kids.
She didn't even eat all of the second one, so I don't know that we can count.
She's eaten a child and a half. A child and a half is what's been consumed by Diesel.
She is a little bit on the skinny side right now because she hibernates and she hibernates hard. She went down really, really early this last fall. It was actually still late summer. And she just woke up. She's had only a couple of meals since she woke up. And she had a nice full shed the other day. And so she's ready to rejoin the program.
Good shed will do that for you every time. So I think, do you have anything else about Diesel before we let people get a drink or come up and meet Diesel in person?
No, now she's getting ready to go to sleep because I'm rubbing her jaw.
Yeah, Diesel, hang in there. Hang in there.
Whatever.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to take a break. Your options include going and getting another drink and or coming up here and meeting the reptiles. We have hand sanitizer, so worry not. They're very friendly. Larry snuggled my wrist, which was lovely.